blaming everybody else for my problems and not me. My family was a mess. I was a mess, but I wasn't tapped out yet, right? Things kept going. My son, I'd gotten in a fight with him one morning, and because of that, he went to school, got himself expelled. My oldest daughter, at the age of 13, she attempted to take her own life. My baby girl was just terrified of me, and all my friends were gone. I pushed them all out of my life. The wife had been upset with me. We weren't making any progress. I was spiraling hard, even though I was looking for help, and that was it. She was done. She asked me to leave.
So that was a few words from today's guest, Robert Greer. Robert Greer is a former law enforcement officer, and his story, it's not just kind of enlightening to some of the traumas faced by first responders and veterans alike. It's also really inspiring. He's had it all, lost it all, and now he's getting it all back, and that's kind of the whole recovery thing, right? So it is a great episode. It's very powerful, and I hope you enjoy it. And today's episode is brought to you by the You Are Loved merchandise. You can check it out at HOApodcast.com/merch. And if you want to save $10, you can message me directly, and we can sort it out that way. Buying this merch, guys, really does help me to continue spreading the message. I figure I might as well give you some extra value if the content isn't enough. So check it out. I'm really proud of what we put together there. And I hope to hear from you on that. So here's the episode. Hello, everybody. Watchers, listeners, supporters of all kinds. Welcome to another episode of the Ashes to Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, checking in from Krabi, Thailand. I have a special guest with me today in virtual studio coming from Texas. It's Robert Greer. How you doing today, Robert?
Doing okay, man. How are you?
I'm just fine. It's 11:30 at night here, and it's still, I guess that'd be about 85, 87 degrees in American. So, listen, we were talking pre-recording here, Robert, about kind of how we like to do things. Before we get into a lot of recovery stuff, and there's definitely some things we got to talk about in that. We kind of get an idea of your story and kind of where you're coming from. And something I failed to mention to you, there's a couple quick questions that I like to ask to kind of kick that off. And that is to say, do you remember the first time that you got messed up?
Very clearly, yes.
Yeah? Can you tell us about that?
So I grew up as a teetotaler. I'd always wanted to be a cop, and I kind of lived my life a certain way, right? So my oldest brother, I kind of credit for keeping me away from drugs and alcohol when I was a kid. He would tell me stories about these parties he would go to. People would just be, hammered, messed up, throwing up on themselves. And I don't know, I just kind of had a healthy fear for it, very healthy fear for it. First time I can really remember even trying alcohol, I was, probably 21. 20, 21, somewhere in that area. But even then, I didn't
you're
get
a late
drunk.
bloomer by our standards. Okay, yeah.
Well, very late bloomer, because even then I didn't get drunk. I just had a couple of sips of Long Island iced tea, I think it was, Okay. And it wasn't until after I was in detectives, I was on a training trip over in Meridian, Mississippi at Meridian Naval Air Station. And, I was with some guys at that little shitty bar on base there, and they kind of encouraged me to have a few drinks. And I was, 2005, I was probably 26, almost 27 years old.
Wow.
That was the first time I got show enough drunk. I mean, I got hammered. I mean, it was, it was beer. It was something called a snake bite, which is hard apple cider with beer. I didn't know shit about drinking back then. I just wanted to drink something that would taste good, and somebody recommended that. And next thing you know, I'm hammered.
And there's a couple more follow-up questions here. Do you remember how it made you feel?
Kind of happy, kind of loose.
Just the drunk side.
Yeah, okay. Just happy, loose, joyous, having a good time. I heard later on in life, you're supposed to drink when you feel happy, not to feel happy. And at that point, I was, never drink to feel better, only drink when you do feel good, something like that. And at that time, everything was fine. Everything was going well. I was, had been with the sheriff's office about 4 years. I was a new detective. The wife and I had bought a house, had a kid, had another one on the way, just a lot of good things. Actually, we had 2 kids at that point. Just a lot of good things going on in life. And I was in a safe environment, didn't have to worry about driving, was with good people. So why not? The wife encouraged it. And matter of fact, I remember her telling me that she was proud of me. Because I'd always been scared of it. And she's like, well, I'm proud of you. You did great.
Wow. Okay. So being a late bloomer, that kind of ends there's this whole kind of line of questioning that I do, but it's like, I don't even know what to do because you kind of caught me by surprise with that. But so tell me, how does one go from, if you give me kind of the Reader's Digest version, from really getting messed up for the first time in your mid-20s to being on a podcast about recovery? Like, there's got some stuff happened in between then and now. And, let's, kind of give me what's going on.
Yeah, definitely a late bloomer. And when I did catch up, I caught up in a big way. I kind of made up for lost time, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But like we were talking earlier, I am quite used to telling my story. And through the recovery work that I've done and just in life in general, I guess, I can pinpoint exactly when all this happened. And I can tell you the cause of it. I can tell you why it happened, when it happened, how, where, etc. And when it came to the alcohol, that was in 05, the first time I got drunk, right? I was working in financial crimes with the sheriff's office, and about a year later, a lot of things were going on in life. 2006. 2006 was kind of the red letter year for me, the perfect storm, as it were. We were adding on to our house, trying to expand it. That's a hell of a project, stressful. I had just been assigned to the Northwest Louisiana Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. If you've seen Dateline to Catch a Predator, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do.
I began seeing some of the most heinous things involving children that I'd ever seen in my life. That was a stressful, type situation. Just dealing with the trauma that I would see on a daily basis with, child pornography and internet predators. And then at the same time, I was in the process of being evaluated for what ended up being Crohn's disease.
Okay.
I mean, looking back, it was probably always there and dormant, but there's always something that kind of kick it off, right? And the stress of everything I was going through that particular time in 06 just kind of made it amped up a little bit. In August of 06, I was to the point where I was shitting blood, losing a lot of weight, lots of ulcerations in my mouth. I was in bad shape.
Wow.
I was supposed to have a colonoscopy. The insurance company canceled it because I was so young. I wasn't even 40 yet, and wanted me to get a second opinion. And before that could happen, I was on my roof during this construction project. It was raining. I messed around, got on a tarp, and slid off the roof, lost my grip and slid off the roof and hit the concrete below. Messed up my ankles pretty good, fractured my left wrist, broke my back again. I say again because in 01 in a car wreck, I had crushed the L2 vertebrae. This time I crushed the L3 and then busted my head open. Back of my head bounced off the concrete. So I ended up in the hospital. And the short version of that story, I mean, it's a whole story to it, but the short version of that, I was there with the injuries and I'm like, hey, since I'm here, why don't y'all go ahead and knock out that scope for me? They did. I was in bad shape. About a week later, my colon perforated. And it's kind of like an appendix. If you don't get that shit out, you're going to die. So they did emergency surgery in the middle of the night. I woke up with 50 staples in my stomach and a colostomy bag. It was a horrendous experience, to say the least. Broken back, broken wrist, stitches in my head, and now 50 staples and a colostomy, and not knowing, what was going to happen next. They took out all but about 18 inches of my colon, and I was in the hospital for 19 days and lost 45 pounds. And when I came out, I was a shell of a person. There was a lot going on, not just with that, the uncertainty of the future, wearing a colostomy, all this other kind of stuff. Added with the stress of the internet task force that I was off for a few months, recovering, but then I went right back to that work. So there was a lot going on at that time. And I can remember early 07, I had about 7 months after, I had another surgery to remove the colostomy and reconnect what was left in my colon to my small intestines, right? But sometime during that time, I'd also had a couple of kidney stones, but sometime during that time, I remember sitting with my wife at a Mexican restaurant, trying to remember everything that happened in those 19 days in the hospital, because there was large gaps. There was days I just couldn't remember. And I decided I want to have a drink. And I wasn't much of a drinker. I didn't know what to drink, but, margaritas look good. Okay, let me have a margarita. And that kind of started it right there. I guess I began to drink to forget. And somehow within the next 5 years, I went from that one margarita to I'm going through 3 liters of tequila in a week for my margaritas. And, I drank them on the
Mm,
rocks and kept them in the fridge. My triglycerides were in the 700s. I was about 285 pounds, 5 years later.
yeah.
But at the same time, that's the alcohol aspect of it. It went just that quick, it seems, from that one margarita to I'm going through 3 liters.
So if
But
I can interrupt for a quick second, Robert,
sure.
my original line of questioning, because typically, and the reason you kind of stumped me with that when I was asking about your first time you got messed up, was because it almost invariably comes down to it made me feel a certain way, and then I'll ask somebody, were you self aware enough at the time? The answers vary because, like, to understand what it was doing for you. The answers vary because of age and self awareness and all those things. At this late stage in life, I feel now that line of questioning, now that I have some context to your journey, at that point, did you realize what you were doing when you started drinking? Or is it with benefit of hindsight that you can say that that's why you were drinking? Right.
No, it's the benefit of hindsight. It's
Okay.
I think as
Okay.
Kierkegaard said, life can only be lived forward but understood in reverse, right? Uh,
Yep.
and and
Oh,
looking
I like
back,
that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and, and looking back, that I began to understand that I didn't know it at the time. At the time, I'm just doing normal shit, right? I'm just having a drink. Everybody has a drink. Now,
Yeah.
and I built up to all that to say that it wasn't because it tasted good. It wasn't because I was hanging out with the boys. It was because I was beginning to have some memories and some thoughts and some feelings that I did not want to feel, that I wanted to escape from.
Mm. Yeah.
I was off for a few months. I had some surgeries, this and that. But I went right back to working financial crimes and working the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And eventually, after, I don't know, about a year and a half of that, they moved me to youth services full time to where I would be working the task force as well as regularly assigned crimes against children in the parish. Uh, so my drinking
Mm.
experience came along right at the time when I was under the most stress and seeing the most things that I wanted to not see. Now, I'm not going to run from my duties. I'm not going to run from my responsibility. When you see kids suffering, shit, I'm all in. I'm going to do everything I can to bring about a successful conclusion in these cases. But at the same time, what was going on in my head, I did not want to feel. I did not want to see. I did not want to hear. The memories, the nightmares I began to have, I began to escape all that. And at the same time, Chuck, it was pain pills as well. Now, I didn't have a pain pill problem until 07 probably is when it started. And I can remember then when it started too. It's kind of a funny story in my opinion. Other people think maybe not, but I think it's funny. Like I said, in 01, it was when I broke my back the first time. I had 4 wisdom teeth extracted. And on the way home, I was high as a kite and I was, distracting the wife and we got T-boned on both sides. But they gave
Ooh.
me pain pills then, but it wasn't that big a deal, I guess. But in 07, after I had that second surgery,
Mm-hmm.
I had that colostomy for 7 months, right? And after I had that second surgery, I was at my office one day in financial crimes and I tried to fart, right? I tried to fart and I shit all over myself. What we would say on the firing line in police world, I had a negligent discharge, right? uh, I mean, it is
I'm
what it is.
taking
If
that one
you're,
too. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the military, law enforcement, and you can say that you never shit yourself before, you're a fucking liar, right? But anyway, it is what it is.
Okay.
But I bring it up because it's a normal thing. I'm sitting at my desk. I try to pass a little gas because I have 18 inches of colon now, and gas hurts. And I defecated on myself. I was embarrassed. I got in my car, didn't say anything to anybody, got in my unit, and drove home to clean up. And it was bad too. It was one of those start your day over kind of things. And on the way home, those pain pills, the hydrocodone, Percocets, whatever they were at the time, were in my center console. And I
Yeah.
took 2 of them. And I can tell you, man, I was not in any pain that day. It was the mental pain. And I can
Yeah.
pinpoint that looking back as the moment that pain pill addiction started because, man, they made me feel great. They made me feel warm and fuzzy. They made everything right with the world again. And on that day, I couldn't stand to feel the way that I did, and that made me escape.
That's interesting to me because you said in 2001 there wasn't a problem. Now with all this stuff going on that's happened and that's happening in your life, now it turns into a problem, which kind of speaks to so many things when it comes to addiction, right? It's why some people can take it, some people, whatever. That's interesting. Continue, please. Yeah.
Yeah, some people, have experience with alcohol or pills, and it never becomes an issue. And it seemed like for me, I mean, I knew addiction ran in my family, and I've been warned all my life, to stay away from it, and I did. And then by accident, it just kind of happened. I mean, it's prescribed by a doctor, right? I mean, I had 50 staples in my stomach on that first surgery. Just all these, and the colostomy itself, all these different things going on. So it was a legitimate need for this med. But then sooner or later, it began to make me feel good. And then the pain was psychosomatic. The pain wasn't really there. It was the mental anguish.
Yeah, of course.
Combined with the stuff that I was doing at work, and like I said, eventually I got transferred over to youth services, and I was full time for 5 years, working the Internet Task Force and the crimes against children cases. So there was a lot going on in that time, plus just the normal stressors of life. So before I knew it, I was addicted. Before I knew it, I was having these horrendous nightmares and night terrors and stuff from stuff I was seeing at work, and on antidepressants. I was on prescription sleep aids. I mean, I was on Ambien, and I would be consuming these huge mugs, 3 of these every night of hardcore strong margaritas, taking that and watching TV until I just passed out, and then waking up in a puddle of urine every time. Not every time, but more often than not, knowing that my central nervous system was so depressed, I was probably that close to death. That's how rapidly with me it progressed,
Yeah.
And then, there was some other things that happened in the career. I was a cop for 16 and a half years, deputy sheriff rather, for 16 and a half years. And, there were some other things that continued to make it worse. We see a lot of stuff on patrol. We see a lot of stuff in detectives just in general. I had 2 fatal shootings, the first of which was a suicide by cop scenario where a methamphetamine addict was at the end of his rope and tried to commit suicide but lacked the means, and forced me into a situation where, it was me or him, and I killed him in front of his son. His son was about 10 years old at the time. It struck me in several different ways. Initially, I did what I had to do, to get home to my family. But the man was at the end of his rope. He pulled out a pair of pliers, but in a shooter stance after saying, I have a gun. And, at that time, I had no choice. But looking back, it was, my oldest brother, unfortunately, he was a methamphetamine addict at that time. And it was like I killed my brother. And then later on, as my own disease progressed, it was like I killed myself, and it took me a long time to reconcile that one. The second one was a little bit different situation. It was a paranoid schizophrenic off his meds, and he actually shot at some officers. And, long story short, we chased him, and, he forced us into that situation. He was trying to shoot at other officers when we shot him. That one wasn't as bad, but still, it wasn't great, along with just a plethora of dead babies on patrol, dead people, just the things that we see in law enforcement that we just can't escape from is every day. It's not deployed overseas for 3 months at a time, maybe see 15 days of combat. I mean, it's every damn day.
Right.
While being in the community with it. And, like I said, I didn't set out to be an addict or alcoholic, but before I knew it, I was, and I couldn't admit it, It was normal, I guess you could say, in that brotherhood, in that world with, law enforcement or first responders. When I was in the academy, first few years of my career, I don't know, maybe I wasn't that well liked, but, I didn't go out drinking with the guys, choir practice, as they call it, right? They knew that I didn't drink, and I didn't go with them. And then before you knew it, I'm out drinking everybody else at some of those parties and doing other stupid shit, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So it was a rapid progression for me. It really was.
No kidding, man. I can't. Yeah, the trauma. Oh, the trauma's there. You just keep knocking them off, right? That's a hell of a checklist. I have to ask. You're the first cop I've had on, or ex cop, I guess, right? Which is just. I got to say this. Funny timing. 3 days ago, my arresting officer reached out to me to say, "Hey, I see what you're doing. I'm really proud of you." Right, from my days in active addiction. So, pretty big deal for me, right? Like, because that's a hard case, right? So to be sitting here now with a cop and doing my first, it was just kind of crazy timing, right? So, in that brotherhood, I can only assume that alcoholism and whatever self-soothing behaviors, whatever they might be, run rampant, right? Because the trauma. In your time in law enforcement, have you noticed a shift? Because I think that there'd be at least from where I am, what I would assume, again, more assumptions on my part, is that kind of toxic masculinity thing would make it hard for people to admit, hey, I've got this problem, right? Or and not even toxic. I'll say this: perceived toxic masculinity, where your brothers, you're worried what they would think, and in the end, they probably would support you had you admitted it. But can you kind of speak to that whole realm, that idea that you know what I'm trying to say, I think, right?
Yeah, it's the stigma, right? And
Yeah.
I get what you're trying to say with the toxic masculinity part of it. It's that, I think, would be a more harsh way to put it, but it puts it in the proper context. It puts it in the right frame of mind of that competitive edge that we have. You know, we're the ones called upon all the time to handle everybody else's problems. We're trained to be stoic. We're trained to show up on scene, keep our emotions in check, and handle everybody else's problems. But we're not really trained on how to take a step back and to deal with our own issues. At least at that time we weren't. Maybe some departments are changing that now. But we're not trained on how to really let go of those emotions and deal with our own needs. We're here to take care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. And when it comes to that stigma, there's a lot of people, a lot of agencies where, you know, you're considered weak if you take a step off the line and say, hey, man, I need a break. You know, I need some help. I need to take care of some issues with myself. Right. That's part of it. You don't want to be, perceived as weak. The other part of it is, you know, sometimes that angst gives us that competitive edge, you know, that fuel, that drive, and we keep it regulated with substances sometimes to where it doesn't get out of control, but we don't lose it and it doesn't overwhelm us. You know, that's of course one way to put it. But, you know, in the practical world, in the real world, I'm a law enforcement officer. I have a gun, I have a badge, I have arrest powers, the power to take somebody's life. And if I raise my hand and say, hey, boss, I can't control my drinking or my pill use, that's a problem for my career. You know, can I be trusted to have that gun, that badge, that authority, that power? And most of us in that world, in that realm, you know, we've worked very hard to get where we're at. And we don't want to lose that. You know, we don't want to say, hey, I got a problem I need to take care of because I need this job and I'm trying to advance my career. But we go to extreme lengths to hide it. Not only was I hiding my substance use, but hell, I was PEC'd on duty, not on duty, but
PEC'd.
Physician's Emergency Commitment Order. In 2016, I mean, you're a danger to yourself or others. In 2016, I had switched antidepressants and went to Prozac, and I spiraled, I plummeted. And, you know, as law enforcement officers, if I pull you over and you say, hey, I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to kill this person, you know, click, I'm taking you for a mental health evaluation. And at this point in my life, I had spiraled so far that the suicidal ideations were I couldn't control them. And I went to the doctor with my wife, my personal physician with my wife. I was in uniform. My patrol car was idling in the parking lot, pistol on my hip. Doc, I can't stop thinking about blowing my fucking head off. And, you know, she gave me the option. Either you go to the emergency room right now and call me when you're there, or I'm calling the coroner and having you committed. What choice did I have? You know, so I called my lieutenant, said I need some personal time. I ended up being inpatient on a 72-hour hold. I was there 3.5 days. That's the lengths I went to hide what was going on. I couldn't tell my boss, hey, I can't stop thinking about killing myself. I need to go to the hospital. I told him, hey, I need some personal time. And knowing that it would have cost me my career if I got PEC'd, but I didn't want to lose what I thought I had. Now, looking back, damn that. My life is way more valuable than that. My family is way more valuable than that. Of course. I was combat ineffective in so many ways, and I couldn't let go. I was hanging on too tight. It's like that old rock and roll song, hang on loosely. If you hang too tightly, you're going to lose control, man. I was losing control. I really was.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't let go. Looking back, obviously I would have done things a different way. But I thought I was, trying to maintain that career.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, there's so much there. There's so much. So is that enough now? You've been almost PEC'd, right? You've got the 72-hour hold. Tell me that's where it stops.
No.
Or no?
No, and I was PEC. I went to the emergency. I went home, put my patrol car, parked my patrol car, took off my uniform, grabbed some clothes. Wife drove me to the emergency room, and I said, I'm voluntarily checking myself in. Doctor said, why? And I told him, and it was physician's emergency commitment. I had no choice at that point.
Okay. So, do they know this at work then? Like, is that an automatic thing that I'm not sure how that works, right? Or how much level of privacy there. So
in all honesty, it should have been. It should have been something that they knew about, but I just couldn't.
Some sort of mechanism, right? Because, right. Got a lot of power, now, So, okay.
And I will say this, and this is me being perfectly honest these days. That was just my perception at the time and the way that I was holding on. Now, for anybody listening out there, before it gets to that point, go to your agency, talk to your employee assistance program manager, talk to your supervisors and say, hey, man, I'm having some difficulty. I need to address this. There are mechanisms in place to get you the help that you need, get you back to work, maybe in a different capacity until you can get back to full duty. It's not worth doing what I did. It is not at all worth doing what I did. I did it exactly the wrong way. But with the short version is I felt like with my agency that I couldn't. It's that old school mentality, brotherhood of, suck it up, buttercup, get your ass back to work.
And I guess that's kind of what I was asking about earlier there, Robert. Was that your perception? Was that the reality? And has that evolved over time in your experience?
A little bit of both. It was my perception, but not everybody there was the same. There were some people that had a good hold on it and could say, hey, man, this is what you need to do. This is who you need to talk to. And there was other people that were just as much of a drunk as I was. They just hadn't spun out of control as I had. And absolutely it has progressed. I was chatting with a guy I just went to Warrior Path with. He works for an agency over in East Texas. And they are contracted with a group of counselors where you just go and they send the bill to the agency. They don't tell the agency why. They don't hide the information from you. The way that it was with me, if I wanted to go and see the shrink, the agency paid for it. I didn't get a copy of the report because I wasn't the client. The agency was. Right? And so... It wasn't very conducive to me going and seeking help. So I sought help on my own with my own counselor out of my pocket, right? Instead of going to the agency. And
as a public servant, first responder, that is insane.
It is.
That would even be an option to come out of your pocket. And I'm glad to hear that it's evolved. I'm really glad to hear that it's evolved.
Now, I can't say that for everywhere in Louisiana, but there's agencies all across that it is evolving. Like I said, my buddy, the agency he works for is a separate entity from the agency. They send the agency a bill that somebody receives services. They don't say for what. Now, of course, if there's a threat to life, they have to deal with it, or a crime committed, et cetera.
But that's across the board. That's just the medical profession in general, right? So, right.
But it has evolved, but it has to evolve from the top down, right? It can't
Yeah.
evolve from the bottom up. The agency heads have to be the leaders in that. The agency heads have to be the ones to say, look, man, I've been in law enforcement for 40 years. I have troubles. I have nightmares. I've dealt with alcoholism. I've dealt with this, and I go see this person. And these are the things that I do for mental health wellness. The agency that I work for, I love those folks to death. The sheriff just retired. He's got 51 years in law enforcement. 51
Ooh.
years. Now you can imagine dating back 50 years, the stuff that we're talking about right now isn't
No.
stuff that would be openly talked about,
Of
right?
course not. Yeah. Yeah. No. No. No.
So
Yeah.
of course the perception, if this guy, he's bulletproof, I got to be like this guy, but what is he really like? Is he somebody that does struggle with these things? And what does he do to alleviate that? And there were other people in my law enforcement career. The Bossier City Marshal, Johnny Wyatt, he has passed on now. He was marshal for a long time. He was very open about sobriety. He was very open about his struggles early on in his career. And looking back, I wish I had sat and really talked to that man. I really do. He was
Yeah.
just a lion. He was a rock. But he had, the right mindset. So, it changes and it evolves.
Of course it does. Of course it does. Right. So okay, let's get to it here. Where is enough, man? Tell me what happens. The transition from that to recovery, right? And it's often that's not a straight line or even a clear line, but do your best, right?
Yeah. And, this is, trust me, the Reader's Digest version of all this. There was so much more that happened in my career, so many traumatic events personally, professionally. And, I talk about that on the podcast that we do, but, I'm open about it because it helps others. But the short version, I'm stubborn. I rode that to the bitter end. I kept getting in trouble. My substance use was affecting my mental health, and my mental health was affecting my ability to do my job. I kept getting in trouble. And it got to the point where they didn't know what the hell to do with me because I wasn't admitting I had an issue. And there at the end, I spent 8 months on paid administrative leave while they were trying to figure out what to do with me. They were sending me to their shrink, and I'm just arrogant. I'm self-righteous. I'm blaming everybody else for my problems and not me. I get the opportunity to get a second opinion from my own psychologist and my counselor, and they diagnosed me with PTS. But I didn't accept it, and I wasn't honest about how much I was drinking and the pill use. I wasn't honest about any of that. So it became a difference in opinion between their professionals and mine, and they had no choice but to fire me. Now in Louisiana, it's a right to work state. Deputy sheriffs are fire at will. There's no civil service for deputy sheriffs. There's no union. It's a job, and they can fire you for whatever they
Wow.
want. Yeah, minor policy violations are major, and I'm not blaming. Now, let me say this. I want to be clear about this. Initially, I did blame them for everything, but looking back, working the steps, I saw where I had everything to do in that resentment. But that's later on. But they had no choice but to terminate my employment in January 2018. And they advised me to apply for a disability through the Sheriff's Pension Relief Fund, our retirement system. And I was able to do that. We were in a bankruptcy at the time. And I couldn't afford to make the bankruptcy note. So I just lost my career, and I had to surrender the house in July of 18. Everything that I had ever worked for pretty much was now gone, right? So career's gone, house is gone. We moved 2 hours south back to where we grew up and lived with her parents. We had 3 kids. My family was a mess. I was a mess, but I wasn't tapped out yet, right? Things
No.
kept going. My son, I'd gotten in a fight with him one morning, and because of that, I was in the wrong, but because of that, he went to school, got himself expelled. My oldest daughter, at the age of 13, life was such a shit show, she attempted to take her own life. My baby girl was just terrified of me, and all my friends were gone. I had pushed them all out of my life. I was getting on everybody's nerves. I was drinking heavily. I was taking a lot of pills. And at this time, I was on the marijuana maintenance program. I was smoking a lot of weed. And it all came to a head July 4th of 20. The wife had been upset with me. We weren't making any progress. I was spiraling hard, even though I was looking for help, and that was it. She was done. She asked me to leave, and I went and moved into a buddy of mine's house after he had just moved out, moved into a new place, and I'm, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of his old house. I'm going to be a handyman while I'm renting it, right, and kind of fix the place up. I'm very grateful to him for that, but it was a bad situation. Made it about a month looking at retreats and stuff like that to put a Band-Aid on the problem, thinking I could fix this on my own, right? And I couldn't. In fact, with this computer, I had looked into the First Responder Support Network West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat for cops, a 2-week retreat to deal with PTS and whatnot. And they want you to be sober. So I'm doing their online meetings on Wednesday night. And while I'm doing the meetings, I got a big mug of beer behind the computer. I lean over, take a drink, and, lean back. I wasn't taking anything serious. No, July 31st, I made a very long drunken Facebook post that I thought was somewhat poetic, but whatever. The next morning, the wife had looked at it, and she sent me an email saying she was in fear for her safety. She was going no contact with me and filing for divorce. Dude, that was the worst day of my life, August 1st of 20.
Okay.
And I flipped out, but fortunately that night I'm sitting there, and look, there had been multiple times when I had the pistol in one hand and, beer in the other, just daring myself to do it. And that night, though, instead of pulling the trigger, I picked up the heaviest object in the world at that time in life, the telephone, right?
Yeah.
I picked up that phone and I started making calls and looking for treatment centers. And I had been listening to a podcast called Friends in Recovery. It was, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's...
I haven't.
One of the hosts, Mike, he was a retired cop turned clinician, and his buddy Jersey Ed, longtime drug addict, and had gotten sober, and they started this podcast. They were sponsored by a group down in Florida called the Genesis House.
Okay.
It's a 30-day retreat for cops, and that was the first people I called, and they needed 10 grand, and I was like 40 grand short. That math just don't work, right? And just, by the grace of God, they referred me to this person who referred me to that person who referred me to Warrior's Heart.
Okay.
And
okay.
I looked at Warrior's Heart and I'm like, man, this is for military. And no, it's for first responders too. Well, I don't have insurance because I was fired without insurance.
Mm-hmm.
My pension is very small. I didn't have any resources whatsoever. And fortunately, I made application to the foundation. I was able to go to Warrior's Heart and
On
check in on scholarship. Now, I did have to pay some, but I was willing. At that point, we talk about willingness in AA, right?
Yeah.
We talk about knowing when life is unmanageable. At that point in my life, I had finally tapped out. Life was unmanageable. I was done. I had nothing left. Everything that I'd ever cared about was fucking gone. Everything.
Wow.
I was at odds with most of my family. None of my friends wanted to talk to me. My career was gone. My house was gone. My possessions were gone. Now my family's gone.
No kidding.
So I was willing to do whatever it took. I started a GoFundMe. I applied for foundations, and I did whatever it took.
Yeah.
So that's when it started.
That's crazy. This isn't my story, so we're not going to get right into it, Rob. But I'm in Thailand because I came to a trauma treatment center here called Yatra. Mm-hmm. Mike Miller, who's he's 20 years clean. It was the first time on my show. Was his 20-year sober date, actually. And he's a devout 12-step. I should say devout. He's a 12-stepper, and he's probably the most knowledgeable person I've ever met when it comes to the program. He came on the show. We did the episode, and at this point, I'm like 4 or 5 months I've got under my belt. He came on. We did the episode about trauma specifically. I hit stop record, and he went, "You have some shit you need to deal with," and he offered me a scholarship to come to Yatra here in Thailand.
Oh, wow.
And so begins my healing journey, like the real healing journey, right? Up until that point, I've got the show. I'm living recovery for 4 months. I think I got things dialed in, but I don't. I'm a hot mess. My trauma is very different years. It's on the other side of the law. Some of the things I experienced in the last couple of years of my active addiction, right? But it's horrible. but yeah, that scholarship, that help, it just meant so much. Right. And well, once I was here, I just why go home? It's so much it's just so much less expensive to live here, and it's beautiful. It's paradise. Right. So that's why I stayed. But I found that kind of cool. Warrior's Heart. Tell me about Warrior's Heart. Actually, you mentioned the podcast first. Let's talk about that right away. And then let's talk about Warrior's Heart. So, your podcast, what's that called? Tell us a bit about that.
It is called the High Speed Chicken Feed Podcast.
High Speed Chicken Feed Podcast. Yes. I saw something about that on your Facebook, but I wasn't sure what that was all about. Now it all makes more sense to me. Okay. So,
and you can
High Speed Chicken Feed. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You kind of see the outline of the logo there. Now, that wasn't something that was immediate, and that was not my brainchild. One of the guys I went to treatment with at Warrior's Heart, his name's Kyle Miller. I don't know, it was a year and a half after we left, that he hit me up and said, "Hey man, we're doing a podcast, come tell your story." And that morphed into me being one of the co-hosts, because the other guy he was doing it with, one of our friends from treatment, he just wasn't able to stay sober during that time frame. So it morphed into me and Kyle, kind of doing it. Now the name, High Speed Chicken Feed. In some circles, that is a derogatory terminology for methamphetamine, right?
Oh, okay. I've never heard that one before. It makes perfect sense now that you say it. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I guess it depends on what part of the country you're from, or what country, if you as it were. But in this area, the High Speed Chicken Feed, baby, that's that good meth, right? Which was Kyle's DOC.
Sense now that you say it, right? Continue
Well, that was not only Kyle's DOC, but drug of choice, but and what tore him down. But growing up where he grew up, a lot of cockfighting, the rooster fighting. And sometimes they would give those roosters a little bit of meth, to
really,
to make them fight a little bit better, a little harder.
That's crazy. My next door neighbor has fighting chickens. Actually, the fucking roosters wake me up every freaking morning. Let me tell you. But anyway, I can't get into it. He invited me to the fights. I was like, man, I know.
It's
never going to happen. Right? I'm not going to bring my Western shit here to your country, but no, I'm not going to go to a chicken fight. It's not going to happen anyway. So continue.
So it started with that. They had the name, had the image, and basically it's, in short, the way we describe it is about our lives of service, how that service broke us and how we came back from that brokenness. And it's a podcast for the military and first responder community, those who've lived a life of service and then ended up just being broken from it.
No kidding.
And we're kind of long format. We tell our stories, and kind of like what we were talking about earlier, we concentrate. I mean, it's long format, so we get a little bit more in depth, but we talk about our life of service to kind of qualify ourselves for our audience, to let them know, hey, we've been there. We've done the same shit that you've done. You're not that different. You don't have that terminal uniqueness. It gets everybody. We can come back from it. We tell that part of our story, and then we talk a lot about what works in recovery. Talk a lot about how we got to recovery, what that recovery looked like, and life after recovery, what keeps us sober. And everybody seems to have a little bit something different for that healing modality, whether it be acting, whether it be motocross racing, whether it be doing podcasts. Everybody has something a little different. And we've told a lot of stories. We've only been in it a couple of years now, and we'll record a batch of episodes for a few months, and then edit and push them out and take a few months off, because we have full-time jobs, families and whatnot. And then we'll come back and do it again. And we're at the end right now of a big batch of episodes that we're recording. We're about to edit and push them out during the summer months. But and
for anybody that's listening, if you check out our Facebook page, I just now shared the High Speed Chicken Feed out to the Ashes to Awesome. So make sure that you check them out. Of course, there'll be some more in the show notes as that as well. But yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, by all means. And the thing is there's this community, and I'll speak to this real quick, and maybe it's something that you've become familiar with. Well, I'm sure you have, but the online recovery content creation community is massive and unbelievable, right? We're at a place now, or my show after a year, have heavy involvement with other people. And I'm a little bit different because I started the podcast and that's all I've done since I started it. Right. Like that's been my, and I've eaten mayo sandwiches. I've done it's been a rough go for the first while, but this is what I do for a living now. Wherever you are in the world, it really doesn't matter. Whatever part of the US, Canada, South Africa, Thailand, Australia, Ireland, these are all places that have helped people find help because of the online content creators, right? These people that are, it has changed the game in the coolest way, right? So in now that you and I are talking, Robert, there's like, now you're going to be part of this whole little thing where you just, your thing gets pushed out because it's like, people are beautiful, man. It's one of the coolest things to me is that social media can be toxic in so many ways, but it can be awesome in so many ways as well. Right. So how often do your episodes, are they released and with any sort of regular schedule or
not a regular schedule? No.
No.
We'll do is most of our stories are like a 3-hour story. So we'll bust it up into 2 episodes and we'll push out like say Monday, we'll release part 1 of one guy's episode. Then the following week we'll release part 2. And then the week after we'll do part 1 of the next guy. We may have 6 or 8 guys that we interview. So that's 16 roughly different episodes that we'll push out for a few months and then take some time off. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. I see.
And they go different lengths too. We recently interviewed Tom Spooner. Tom Spooner is one of the co-founders of Warrior's Heart, but he was also in Delta for 20 years, Delta Force.
Oh.
Well, I say he was in Delta Force. He was in the military for 20 years, but he was also part of Delta, did some really hardcore stuff. But the more interesting thing about Tom is he's got 35 years of sobriety, and everybody wants him to tell war stories. And he spoke to us for 5 hours, and in 5 hours, he didn't put down that big book. And he talked about sobriety almost for 5 hours, about recovery for 5 hours. Yeah, and it was some really good stuff, But in the military community, in the military world, Tom's the man. And not just because of what he did in the past, but because of Warrior's Heart, because of his YouTube videos, everything else. But he's a humble guy, So that episode, we may have to split up into 3 parts, because it was 5 hours.
Yeah. Look, my rule has always been the recording stops when the content stops being engaging. So if you can keep me going, if you can keep my attention for 5 hours, we'll do 5 hours and we'll put in as many episodes as we need to, right? That's kind of my rule about the whole thing, right?
Right.
I mean, anyway, Warrior's Heart. Let's talk about that, your experience there, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I will give you a tie-in a minute with, if you remind me, with the podcast and what I do now.
I'm a remindee. I'm not a reminder. Let's get that established in this relationship right now. Okay.
I will try to come back to it and tell you how it all ties together, but it's a beautiful story, right?
Yeah.
What's the 11th step? We sought to improve our conscious contact with our higher power, praying only for his will for our life and the power to carry that out, right? Yeah. So from early on, when I was at Warrior's Heart, I prayed for his will for my life and the power to carry that out. And how it all ties together is an interesting, beautiful story. But yeah, Warrior's Heart, right? It's not your average rehab, and I'm not giving you the sales pitch. I'm giving you the, hey, I went there pitch, right?
Yeah.
It's for the military and first responder community exclusively, and I'm sorry for those that we exclude, but, I may be sitting around telling stories about things that I've seen and done that makes most people have a traumatic experience just hearing the damn stories, Same thing with a lot of the other military guys, some people will go into treatment because, they had a bad breakup, marriage, bad car wreck, and other guys are coming into treatment saying, man, I burned a kid in combat. I had to kill 15 kids or, whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's a different type of environment. Not only that, people like us, we don't feel like we can open up to somebody unless they've been there, they've done that, And how many people have done what we've done? We're a very stubborn community. We have that terminal uniqueness pretty bad. So this place was created for that warrior community, for the military and first responders. And I was so very blessed to go there. We're here in Bandera, Texas, which is near San Antonio, the Texas Hill Country. It used to be a resort, a corporate retreat for a big oil company. So
Okay.
it's not a lockdown environment. It's not a psych unit or anything like that. I mean, it's a beautiful place, but a 6-week inpatient and it's dual diagnosis. We handle the substance abuse while we're also dealing with our traumas. And that was the first place I ever admitted that I had PTS, right? Uh, in my opinion, at that time, I wasn't a combat vet. I wasn't a soldier at all. I was just a cop. I had bad days. PTS was for those guys who were overseas, killing lots of people. And,
No. Yeah.
you know, that's just
No.
the way that I
No.
viewed it. And then I'm sitting around the fire pit, smoking cigars with the guys, and there's SEALs, there's Marines, there's, all these hard chargers. And they encouraged me to open up, and, I'm talking to them about some of the things that I've told you and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, dude, there's no way I could do what you did. And I'm like,
Right.
hold up.
Right.
I'm supposed to be saying that to you, dude. You were in combat. And I'm like, no, the stuff with the kids, man, all this other. No, you were a cop 24/7, for 16. Yeah. That's when I really accepted, the diagnosis of PTS and really acknowledged the trauma. And that's the only way you're going to heal from any of that shit, is to really accept it, own it, and then start to wage your way through it. But some of the, we call it training rather than treatment, but some of the training that they do there is very specific. For example, the lifeline. Now, a minute ago, we were talking about how, I was real specific with when my addiction started and how it started. A lot of that is due to the Lifeline Project. We get assigned that when we're there, when we first get there, and halfway through, we present it to our small group. It's a long butcher sheet of paper that they give you. On one side is your positive core values, positive people in your life, and the other's the negative core values, negative people. And you go through from birth till now of positives and negatives. And I can
Can a
see
person be on both sides of that list?
absolutely. You're supposed to be on
Okay.
both sides of that list. Yeah,
No,
or
no. I meant
people
like
in
if.
your life. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's positive qualities to uh, and negative qualities to just about everybody. My
Of
parents,
course. Right. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
parents loved me very much growing up, but were there some things going on that weren't great?
Which
Yeah,
is
looking
immediately
back.
that reference. I'm glad that you said that, because that is kind of like that's immediately what I thought. Right. Was in all the traumas. Not in all the traumas. Often trauma is a result of some things that have happened in your childhood, but there are these parents that you love so much who you want to defend, and you have a really hard time acknowledging that maybe there was something that happened there, right? So that's why I asked if they could be on both sides of that, right? But continue, please. Continue.
Absolutely. And, later on we learned about, adverse childhood experiences and how all that played into it, which is why they go back to birth, right? And those things kind of set the stage for all that. But going through all that, going through the lifeline, I was able to see exactly where things got off track. I was able to list those major events in my life. And by 2006, I saw that shift. And by
Yeah.
2015, there wasn't a damn thing positive. It was all negative. I could
Yeah.
not find any positives from 2015 until 2020 when I got to treatment.
No kidding.
Uh,
Wow.
and for the way that my brain works and a lot of other people, if I can understand where and how it broke, I can begin to fix it. I can begin to put it back together in some way or another.
Stands to reason. Yeah, that math checks out. Yeah.
So yeah, there's that's one of the big projects. There's a lot of other projects that they do, but they also have a lot of other healing modalities too, man. Stuff that I had never really dabbled in before, but kind of wanted to, like art, right? Art therapy. And I'm not talking about finger painting and macaroni art or some bullshit like that, right? I mean, we do sculpting, pottery work, airbrush, watercolor, oil-based, pour paintings, whatever you can think of. And I don't have them with me. They're in my office, but I did some paintings that were dynamic to me. When I came into Warrior's Heart, the image in my head, the attitude that I had was from a Metallica song, right? I believe it was The
Explain that
Unforgiven
one.
3. Yeah, The Unforgiven 3. And the lyrics of it, but one part in particular where he's saying...
Metallica song. Sorry, I misheard you. I thought you said Metallica. I was like, what the fuck is that? Okay, no, of course,
yeah.
Unforgiven. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
And in The Unforgiven 3, he's saying, forgive me not, forgive me not. Why can't I forgive me? And I could not forgive myself for failing those kids. I mean, I had a stack of cases of kids that I'd rescued, people I put in jail, but I had a smaller stack of kids that I could not put the perpetrator in jail. One in particular blamed me personally, after she attempted suicide, and I just could not let go of that shit. And I could not forgive myself, right? And the image in my head, which I was able to put on a canvas, was of a revolver, a 6-cylinder revolver with an empty chamber around, an empty chamber around, kind of like Russian roulette, but forgive me not. The empty chamber was forgive me not. The round was forgive me. That was what was playing through my head, right?
Ooh.
So pull the trigger. If it doesn't go off, oh man, I'm not forgiven. Pull the trigger, it goes off, I'm forgiven, right? Now, it was
That's
a black background.
Messed up way of thinking, man. Hey,
it was. But that's what we come in with sometimes, right?
I get it. Yeah.
And had red blood splatters or red splatters on it like blood, right? Now, I'm not an artist, but Dan, the art instructor there, helped me put that on the canvas because that was what was going on in my mind. Now, when I left there, I was able to do a second one while I was still there going through treatment. But when I left, the new version of me was a lighter background. It had lyrics from a song called Terror by the Red Hot Chili Peppers about living life. And it was reversed. The revolver was reversed or the cylinder was reversed to where the empty cylinder was forgive me and the round was forgive me not, right? So it was that shift in the way that I was thinking at the time. That's just one of the electives that I was able to take. And there's so many, there's wood shop, metal shop, there's fishing, cooking, the K9 program. We talked a minute ago about the K9 program.
Yeah, I want to know about that. Right.
Well,
is that something that you got into?
It is.
Yeah?
I had a dog.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
In 2018, November of 18, my wife, now ex-wife, got me a dog. And I raised her up as a puppy, and she was supposed to be my service dog. And I was working on trying to getting her trained when I had to go to treatment, or when I got to go to treatment, I should say. And it's like a bad country song, right? I lost the house, lost the family, and I lost the dog, right? She didn't take her, but I felt it was best to let the dog stay with the family. But when I got to treatment, I applied to be in the K9 program. And on the very first nature hike, I met Baby. She is an 85-pound bulldog, a mix between American Standard Bulldog and Blue Pit Bull. And she was just happy to see me. And I was able to train her up to be a service dog for me. I was able to work with her, and I was able to apply to foundations to be able to pay for her because unfortunately they're not free. So, but she is a full service dog and she is a beautiful girl. Now I'm going to move my camera a little bit for the video. You see that picture on the wall?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That's one of the pictures that one of the executive directors took of me and her laying down on the grass during treatment, waiting for somebody. I don't know. And let's see, that's her snoring on the couch
she
right
is,
there.
Baby.
Hey, Baby.
Oh, what a doll.
Baby. Yeah, she ain't even going to get up. She's a lazy bulldog, so she's snoozing on the couch there.
That's awesome. Oh, I love me a dog. There's few greater privileges than to have been loved by a dog. Right?
Ain't that the truth?
Oh man, yeah, right. So anyway, so how's that work? They assign you a dog. It's something you have to figure out. Like, tell me a bit more about that at Warrior's Heart, because we do want to talk about Warrior's Heart. So yeah, right.
Well, they get dogs from various places. Some are surrendered, some are from the vet, some are from kill shelters, and they're not all purebreds like you would think, but they're all vetted. We also get a lot of dogs from that are TSA washouts or retired military service dogs, Transportation Security Administration.
Okay. Yep.
So TSA will get a bunch of dogs and try to have them trained up for bomb sniffing, drug sniffing, for airport security. They don't make it. We evaluate them. They're excellent for emotional support or service dogs. And other dogs that are donated through the community, we evaluate them, and some of them are just excellent dogs for ESA or for full service. Baby was donated by somebody here locally, and she was deemed to be an excellent candidate for a service dog. And
that is so awesome. Oh, that is awesome.
Now,
Yeah.
when you're there, if there's a dog that nobody's working with, you can make application to, train with that dog. And Baby had worked with a couple of other warriors who were unable to take her home for finance reasons or whatever other reason, clinical denial. So I was able to start working with her, and we
Okay.
we bonded like that, man. I mean, she was just fantastic.
When
Uh,
you know, right? Yeah.
she's one of
Yeah.
these dogs that likes to jump up and kiss on the face, but she's an
Okay.
85-pound bulldog. So initially I'm terrified. Is she tearing my throat out or what? No, she's just happy to see me. Right.
She doesn't know she's an 85-pound bulldog. She just wants to love. Right?
She thinks she's a lap dog. You'll see pictures of her on our Facebook pages. She thinks she's a lap dog, but she has been tremendous. And in early recovery, man, she went everywhere with me. She helped ground me. She helped keep me normal. She was
Yeah.
trained to mitigate anger issues because at that time in my life, I had explosive anger. 2 or 3 days a week, man, I was just in one of those, I'd wake up in a mood due to the antidepressant I was on and the substances, to where everybody had to be on eggshells around me. And because the slightest thing, I would fly into an absolute lunatic fucking rage. She was trained to help mitigate that as well as the negative, sad emotions. But one of
How
her,
does she do that? How does she do that?
so she fortunately, hasn't really ever had to mitigate the anger emotions, right? But what I trained her to do was when I'm just in that rage, I'm pacing back and forth, I'm amped up, my ventricular, I'm ready to, whoop somebody's ass. She was trained to recognize that and jump and kick me in the chest, right, to get my
Really?
attention. Yeah, I trained her to do that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that gets me focused on her as opposed to whoever's ass I'm about to whoop, right? Now,
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
time, I was about 50 pounds heavier and I had this long beard, this stay the fuck away from me look on my face all the time, right?
Yeah.
And she was trained to recognize that and to jump and kick me in the chest. Uh, and then with the negative emotion, they can smell the pheromones. They get in all up in your face.
Oh,
They
they know.
lick.
They know.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
know. They
Yeah.
want to cuddle with you. But surprisingly, one of her best functions, and this is completely untrained, is she helps me open up, right? I would stay closed off. I wouldn't talk to anybody, but I would go into a store, Walmart or whatever, and people see her and they want to engage with her. Now, the vest, you're not supposed to, but if you ask, right, then
Yeah.
maybe the owner
Yeah.
will let you pet her. People would say,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's a beautiful dog. Tell me about your service. Tell me about her. Initially, I'm like, leave me alone. She's working, whatever. But as time progressed, as I began to heal, people wanted to talk to her and by default talk to me. And next thing you know, I'm having beautiful conversations with people about recovery, about life, about service, about whatever. So her untrained function is helping me open up to people, just not be
I'm
an
going to
asshole anymore.
I'm going to do another parallel to you here because I'd like to do that. Sunny, my dog here, my rescue. I'm in a country where I don't speak the language. I don't really know anybody. I know some people that are at the treatment center still, but got lives, full time, whatever. I'm in a place where grocery shopping can be extremely isolating because you can't read anything. You can't everything's a little harder than it has to be. And meeting people, I don't know who speaks English, who doesn't speak English. I'm just another farang, a foreigner, as they call them here, right? But Sunny everybody wants to say hi to Sunny. Everybody wants to, and the kids want to come say hi. They see him in his sidecar. They all think I'm crazy, right? The neighbors think I'm crazy, but the amount of friendships I have made because of that dog would just blow your mind, right?
Yeah.
When we're driving now in the neighborhood, like in my part of the city here, all the time, honk, honk, hello, people, thumbs up. They absolutely love it. He has given me more opportunity to connect than any other thing in my life. Right. So I can totally appreciate what you're saying. That untrained function is just like, wow, man, what a great side effect. Right. What a great side effect indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
It is. And at that time in my life, man, before I went to treatment, I had this big beard that was part of my mask, that stay the fuck away from me mask. I had this angry scowl on my face all the time. I walked around with my sleeves cut off of my t-shirt. I was big, bowed up at the time, and I was ready to fight anybody. It's like you look at me and say, the hell with that guy. I'm not going to talk to him, right? As I progressed in treatment, one of the things that they said was smile. Even when you don't want to, smile. And it took a lot of work, right? So that combined with having her with me helped me to
I
have more
totally see it.
positive engagements. Yeah.
100%.
And
Of course it does. Yes. Oh, I love that.
and
That makes my heart happy. Yeah.
and suddenly the world wasn't such a shitty place anymore, right? Everybody
Ah,
wasn't an
right.
enemy
Yeah.
anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's so awesome. We could do a whole episode on the dogs, man. We really could. Yeah. He's you know what? It got so often that people were doing this that now I had a couple signs made for the front and back of his sidecar with Facebook and the QR code. So
I love it.
you can follow, because it was just like everywhere I went, right? Whether it's other foreigners or whether it's locals, they just fall in love with them. What other modalities are they offering at Warrior's Heart? Types of therapy? Is there EMDR? Is there cognitive behavior? I'm sure, right? EMDR for me was the most amazing thing for my trauma. So is that one of the things that they offer there, or is it something you have experience with? Or
Yes, and with EMDR, let me address that, then I'll talk about the modalities. EMDR was something I did with my counselor before I went to treatment. And yes, it is fantastic. Eye movement desensitization, reprocessing, restructuring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reprocessing. Yeah.
I always forget the R. But at that time, before I went to treatment, at that time, I was having the horrendous night terrors and nightmares. And the recurring nightmare that I would have was from my first fatal shooting. I would be squared off. I called it the 10-ton trigger pull dream. Every night, it seemed, I'd wake up in a cold sweat because I'm squared off with the suspect and I just cannot pull the trigger on my pistol. And either he shoots me or I wake up right before I get shot. I was having that nightmare just nonstop, which is why I was drinking and taking pills to escape that, right? So I do EMDR with my therapist, and a couple of sessions of EMDR with that, maybe one. I have never had that dream since, and that was probably 10 years ago.
Fuck,
Never,
right?
never
I'll
had that
tell
dream
you,
since.
my first EMDR session. So when you like Yatra is only trauma, it's what they treat, right? Often it's a
Right.
result of addiction, and so the addiction is kind of part of it. But it's the only kind of facility of its kind in the world. They're title sponsor on today's episode as well. But they when you first get there, it's a little while before you get to EMDR and CBT and all that, because there's all sorts of other things. He wants to get you relaxed and in a place where this stuff is really going to take hold. My first session with Mike, as you know, the process, I just had to name that first trauma. I didn't actually have to speak it out. I just, like they do you know how it works. Writing the name down, and I call it hostage, I melted down completely, right? Because now it's fresh in my mind, completely melt down. 25 minutes later, I've done the session with him. I looked at Mike and I said, fuck you, Mike. Because all of a sudden I could talk about it. Like it was like it was a trip to 7-Eleven, right? It was just like, what have you done? And it was just this feeling, and I'm sure just what you just described, this weight, this like, oh my, right? And then then we start ticking shit off. It was like, hey, make a list. Okay, well, here's some stuff that we're gonna, what an amazing thing that is, right? And yeah,
That's fantastic.
So, okay, yeah, now, man, it's something else, but yeah.
Now, like I said, that was my most dynamic experience with EMDR, and I've done it with the nightmares I've had with the raped kids and whatnot, and some other things. But that was the most dynamic example of EMDR. Now, some of our clinicians at Warrior's Heart are certified in that, some are not. Dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, talk therapy. That's there's a whole list. Not just that, but the electives, right? The art elective that I told you about. So much of what was in my head, I was able to put on the canvas. That's healing in and of itself. The wood shop, same thing. Metal shop, right? Here's a quick example of metal shop. Even though it's not typically a therapy, it still is. One of the big projects we do is a tomahawk, Native American artifact, because we're not making weapons and treatment, right? Okay, let me give that disclaimer. We're rich in Native American history on our campus, right? So we take this old railroad spike, we heat it up in a forge, and we hammer the head out into the shape of a blade. And of course, the spike goes into the handle. We make this beautiful tomahawk. And the idea behind that is even an old discarded piece of metal that has no value to it, with the right amount of reshaping, the heat, the struggle, as it were, can be shaped into something beautiful, which is what we do with people.
Oh,
So, right.
yeah.
So even the electives have a therapeutic process behind them. The group therapies that we do, and I'm speaking also from my own experience, not just, okay, I work here, I'm selling this program.
No.
When I
I
presented,
understand.
yeah,
They're my sponsor, but I talk about my experience. Yeah, just the same way that
exactly,
you talk about it. So I completely understand where you're coming from, right? 100%.
right.
Yeah.
Even when I presented the Lifeline, I'm talking about all these things I never wanted to tell anybody about, or I'm going into great detail on juvenile sex crimes with this small group. And how can this possibly help anybody? Well, a quick story about that. Kyle, for example, his daughter was raped, and all he could focus on was the suspect. And something I said during that presentation of my Lifeline was, I would have to tell dads all the time, your baby needs you more than you need vengeance. I know you want to go out and kill this some bitch, but you need to stay with your baby and heal her. If you go to jail, you can't be there for her. And that just
Right.
flipped the script
Yeah.
for Kyle. And same thing with another buddy of mine who was a victim of child sexual assault. The feedback that they gave me from me telling my story, the disclosure, was healing for me. So it's not just what we do with the therapist, it's what we do in the groups, it's what we do with each other.
100%. Yeah.
When everybody comes in, they're assigned a licensed chemical dependency counselor as well as a trauma therapist. They have 2 appointments per week with those guys. So that's like 4 appointments a week times 6 weeks. That's 24 appointments in that inpatient time frame, that 6-week time frame. That's a lot. Plus, like I said, and the campus itself is great. I'm not going to lie, man. I've heard stories of treatment centers that other people have gone to, and I'm so blessed and fortunate to have been able to go to Warriors Heart. I mean, we played pool volleyball almost every damn day. You work out in the gym, run around the track, got K9s, got good food, got good people to hang out with, fire pit to smoke cigars around. I mean, what's not to fucking love, right?
Well, that again, to paradise experiencing this, right? So very simple. Awesome.
But as far as
that is so awesome. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. But as far as Warriors Heart, yes, they do have clinicians. It depends on the clinicians that we have available, but yes, they are trained in EMDR, CBT, DBT, exposure therapy, talk therapy,
What's
you
DBT?
name it.
I haven't heard of that one.
Dialectical behavioral therapy. Now,
Can
don't
you
ask
explain
me to
that a
define it. Yeah, I wish I could. I wish I could explain it a little bit better, but I guess
that's fine. I often say I bastardize things when I start talking about them, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I like, here's kind of my like very brief experience with it, and look into it, right?
Exactly. I can tell you that we offer it, but do I know exactly what the hell it is? Now some of it is probably, and I may be completely off base here, but it ties into something else. Some of it is about our behaviors, why we do what we do, and then changing our daily behaviors. Now, being in recovery, you can't just change one thing. You damn near got to change everything about yourself, right?
Yeah, you do.
And one of the first things that we do every day, and it's one of the things that I did every day, was kind of owning the morning, as it were. We start with what we call experiential, whether it be yoga, mindfulness, nature walk, something like that. And one of the things that we practice, me and Kyle and a bunch of other guys that we were taught and we practice and still do, is called SAVERS. It's from the Miracle Morning book. It's an acronym for silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing, right?
Okay.
Now, I'll give you an example of how we did that while we were there in treatment. So we would get up every morning and be at the kennels by 6 to tend to the dogs, feed them, water them, walk them, clean their kennels. And then we would go out on the flight line. There's an airstrip out there. We don't use it anymore, but there's an airstrip. We go out on the flight line and we would sit and watch the sun rise over the hills there in Bandera. And it was always a beautiful sight. So we would sit in silence. We would practice our affirmations of, I'm good enough, I'm loved, I'm worthy, I can heal. We would visualize how our day was going to go. And then our exercise would be walking back and forth from the kennel to the main campus. We would, of course, be doing a lot of reading and scribing throughout the day, right? So that's a practice that we're taught, but it's also a practice I continue to use today to keep myself grounded and on track, right? So it's those little things that we do along with the yoga, which I'd never done yoga before. I mean, the hell with that
Okay.
shit, right? Yeah.
That is, yeah, that's not relaxing at all. Somebody lied to me about that.
And right, and, you know, some guys like me, you know, excuse me for putting it this way, some guys like me, you know, view as yoga as like, you know, some kind of pussy bullshit that those, you know, hippies
Yeah.
do or whatever.
Okay.
And
I know.
and
I get
now,
it.
right? And now I'll knock you over to get into yoga, right? You give me a chance to get into some yoga, I'll be right there with you. I'll freaking love yoga. In fact, my oldest daughter, when she lived with me in the summer of 21, we did trapeze yoga together. I freaking loved it. You know, it was awesome.
That's
Yoga is
crazy,
beautiful, man. Yoga,
Yeah,
transcendental meditation, all that stuff that I used to turn my nose to. I fucking love it. It's so
I used to
helpful and
call it
healing.
all urban voodoo was kind of what I used to call it. And then, you know,
Exactly.
now I'll tell you, like, for 10 years, I didn't do a damn thing physically, right?
Right.
I was a drug dealer. I was a whatever, you know, and then all of a sudden somebody's asking to like origami myself and like stay like relax or, you know, focused or at peace while I'm doing it. I was like, what the fuck are you like? No. Right. And so my first week and a half, even 2 weeks, I would find resentments not to go in the morning. You know, I'd find reasons not to go. And really I was not doing myself a service in doing that. I had to go to the water first. So I got the instructor to actually, he would come in a bit early. And instead of me going to yoga, him and I would go to the pool. Mm-hmm. and just do things because I just had to get myself more flexible and just in a little bit better shape, right? And now it's the one thing that I probably miss it most about actually being at the center. And Mike's invited me, you know, to drive out there if I want to do it. But it's definitely something that I need to get back into because wow, I started embracing. I just loved it after a while, right? But it's something else. So yeah.
It's great practice.
Nothing relaxing about that at all. Right?
No. I will say this about myself. Let me interject for a second.
Yeah. Please do. Yeah.
When I first got there, I'll be very honest, and I have been very honest about this over the years. When I first got there, I was going to save that marriage. I was going to put my family back together. I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. And they kept telling me, you got to do this for you, not for anybody else. So while I was there, I did a family session via Skype or Zoom with the wife, and she told me she did not want to have any form of reconciliation with me. And it shifted. And it shifted from, I got to do this for them to, no, I got to do this for me. And I drank the Kool-Aid. I 100% dove in head first, which is the only way to do it. And if it was yoga, all right, let's do it. If it was meditation, all right, let's do it. Whatever. I did it.
Yeah. Right. I'm glad that you found that because it's almost cliche. You know, you can't do it for anybody else, but you know, most of these cliches come from somewhere, and that's one of them, right?
Smarter people than us. I mean, you can't pour from an empty cup. You know, you can't give away what you don't have.
Exactly. So I try not to put too much emphasis on my clean time or anybody else's. But so, how long you got now, man? How long you been sober?
3.5 years, just over 3.5 years.
Good for you.
I appreciate that. And just to put the final cap on the Warrior's Heart experience, I was there 7.5 months. It was 6 weeks inpatient, and then I transitioned directly into sober living intensive outpatient. And in intensive outpatient, which we have it on campus now, equine therapy and jiu-jitsu we have on campus. But at that time, jiu-jitsu and equine therapy.
I kind of want to go back to North America and check this out.
Let's do it,
of course, man. I'm not a first responder, right? But
well, you can come get a tour anyway. But I stayed in I stayed at the Sober Living Lodge for another 5 months after the residential center. I stayed over there for 5 months and then participated in 2 months of the intensive outpatient where I continued that healing. I took a pass from there and went to a program in Hillsboro, Ohio called Save a Warrior. And it was all about continuing to heal those wounds. At Save a Warrior, we dealt with a lot of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. That was in February of 21. And I say that now because, you know, I did 6 weeks at a rehab, right? But that's not what got me sober or kept me sober for 3.5 years. I had so much stuff that I had to work on that I had to continue working on it. The only way I made it 3.5 years was I didn't, as soon as I left, go back home and try to put the pieces back together. I knew I needed more work and I didn't really have a home to go to. I would have been going back to whatever apartment I could rent, staring at 4 empty walls with no job and no real career or anything. I would have relapsed. I would have relapsed hard and fast. So if you have the opportunity to do something like a sober living house, I can do it. Intensive
Right.
outpatient, do it. If you
Yeah.
can find a
Yeah.
retreat like Save a Warrior, Warrior Path, Mighty Oaks, whatever that fits the bill for you, freaking do it. It's all
So
about that
is
continued
Save a
healing.
Warrior a first responder, like kind of same idea? It's a exclusive to or catered to,
Yeah,
maybe.
it is catered to, and most of the stuff that I'm able to talk about and stuff that I'm able to participate in. Sorry for those out there that don't fit into that category, but the stuff that I'm involved with and the stuff that I've done is specifically for the warrior community, for the military and first responders. First responders at Warriors Heart, for example, cops, firemen, EMTs, emergency room nurses, World Trade Center guys, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these are specific to that category, to that community.
And I would say that unapologetically, it is a specific thing. And if you don't, okay, there's an experience that I'll share with you here, Rob. When I was, and I haven't been to a 12-step meeting in a very long time, my path has gone different. I support 12-step 100%. Mine was more about logistics, and I found some resentments early on, and things just didn't work out. But when I first got sober, I was going to meetings every day that I could in the community I was in. It was 5 out of 7 days where I could go to NA because that was my path. Those other 2 days, they had a couple different AA meetings in town, and I walked into an AA meeting, and I might as well have been in a swap meet with my grandpa, right? It was just, and I walked in and went, there's nothing in common with any of you people here. And there is, because recovery is recovery, right? So, but my experience, if you've been out there in the last 5 years dealing with the new realities of fentanyl and meth together and what that's done to the scene, the level of violence, the depravity, the heartbreaking, that all of that. If you've been sober for longer than 5 years, I feel like maybe it's harder to relate to what's happening right now because the reality is very, very different than it's ever been, right? And that is, it is just is, right? The death, all of it. But anyway, I remember I walked in and I went, nope. And I turned around and walked because I just couldn't relate to it. Maybe or maybe not, that was right. I don't know. But so what you're saying right now, it's like, I can totally understand, right? You're going to walk into a room where you don't feel like you can relate to anybody, then it's not going to be the same experience for you. So I can completely appreciate why it's for first responders only, right? Because I can try like hell to empathize with you, but I will never understand what it's like to take a man's life at work, right? Or to see the things that you've seen. I will never understand that, right? So yeah, I can completely appreciate that. Yeah.
And to that extent, I dabbled in AA in 2019, and I say dabbled. I went for the wrong reasons, under the guise of trying to help my brother get sober, right? And but this was after my daughter's attempted suicide. It was after I broke my back for the third time. Yes, it was a third time. And the
Jesus.
pill addiction was really fucking me over. Summer of 2019, I walked into those rooms. Yeah, I didn't identify with anybody there. I saw the 12 steps on the wall, saw God all over it, and I was at war with God at that point. Fuck this. I didn't read the 12 steps. I didn't buy the book. I went to the meetings and I heard some amazing stories, but I never spoke. I talked to
Yeah.
a sponsor and he told me, if you're still smoking weed, you're not going to get sober. Well, I don't need this guy, right? How right he was. But yeah, I didn't identify with anybody there. Now, looking back, I can say principles before personalities. And that's the beautiful thing about what we're doing right now. You and I were on the opposite sides of the law, but the disease still got both of us and brought us to the same place where we're sitting here having a great conversation about life in
Right.
general, right?
And how many parallels? How many
How many
parallels
parallels?
in the on the
Exactly.
recovery side of this? Right, it's crazy, man.
Right.
It's crazy, right? Yeah.
But to address that, Warriors Heart, they saw that. So Warriors Heart teamed with Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, and they started Warriors Anonymous. Now, Warriors Anonymous is it's an AA group, right? But it's sanctioned by AA World Services, and it is an AA meeting. But to be in that meeting, you have to be of the warrior community, law enforcement, military, first responder community. We have meetings Tuesday through Saturday at 1800 hours on Zoom, and then there's a couple of other meetings. We have
What time zone?
in-person meetings
1800
all
hours.
over. Central Standard
What?
Time.
Okay. Great.
And if you go to
Yep.
warriorsheart.com and look for Warriors Anonymous, you can find the links to the meeting and the passwords and everything. We got WhatsApp chat groups. So, it's our own community, because sometimes we can't find that commonality in the regular groups. Now, I love AA. The meeting I go to in town on Tuesday nights, there's a lot of us in there, but there's a lot of the regular population in there. My sponsor is a construction guy. He wasn't military. I
Yeah.
love him to death.
Yep.
But after I've been in AA for a while, I really began to understand that principles for personality, because it gets everybody. And it's not always about the carnage. It's about the hope, the strength, the future, right? Which is what our podcast is about on, High Speed Chicken Feed. And it's about what we do here. And, as much as we can, as much as you have time, I want to expound on a few things that I have done in sobriety. That have brought me to this beautiful place, but it started with AA. In 2019, I quit drinking beer for like 4.5 months. I didn't stop taking pills. I didn't stop smoking weed, right? I didn't take that shit serious. And what happened? 2020, I lost everything. And then I went and I took it serious, right? It's all about finding that rock bottom. I had found mine in 2020, but ever since then, I've been on the way back up. Now, we talked about being at Warriors Heart for 7.5 months. I went home. I started back up this little food truck business I was running with a buddy of mine. I started trying to heal those wounds from just the carnage of my life. And while working the 12 steps, while mending relationships, and beautiful things began to happen, man. Went to Save a Warrior, but I also repaired relationships with family, with former employers. Debts were forgiven. Just everything that's promised in the 12 steps of the big, or in the big book of AA began to happen. But it took a lot of hard work. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, as they say. It took a lot, but it began to happen. So my journey, August of 20 took me to Bandera. February 21 took me to Columbus, Ohio for Save a Warrior. I had the opportunity, and I sent you a link to it, to contract with a company called Resilient Minds on the Front Lines. It's a company that teaches a 3-day course in resiliency. I had the opportunity to go up for their training to the Jersey Shore in March of 22. Another beautiful trip, another beautiful experience to continue to heal. And then April of 23, I was able to come back to Warriors Heart as an employee, all the while repairing my relationships with my kids. I went through the divorce. She's remarried now. I've been able to make peace with all these things, been able to experience all these people and go to all these beautiful places. I've been very fortunate in that regard. So April of last year, I came back here to Bandera, and it's more of a healing experience than a job. It really is. Because all the while, after I lost my career, all I wanted to do was to be of service to guys like me, to be able to help them find the healing that they needed. So I got a job with Warriors Heart working in missions, answering the crisis line. And, so when people call up, I'm a vet, I'm fucked up, I need help, I need treatment, can you help? Yeah, man, I know what you're going through. I've been there. And I share my story with them, and I tell them what they need to do to come in, and I get them signed up, right? I get them in the process of coming to treatment. Now, the tie-in that I mentioned earlier with the podcast, you're going to love this. Right?
See, I'm a remindee, not a reminder. It's so good.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you might like this, because I sure so like it. So we've been doing the podcast for a while, and we've been airing different stories, and I talk about different people's healing modalities. We aired an episode with Keon Joel. Keon was a Marine. And it was his very last deployment, very last patrol. The next day, he was on a plane going home, right? And it was his very last patrol. He caught a 7.62 round right here underneath his right eye, 4-inch exit wound out of the back of his head, right? He was able to survive that. But of course, when he came home, he was messed up. Yeah. Before he went into the military, he was in theater. He got a scholarship to go to Stephen F. Austin University for acting. So during his healing, he got back into acting, and that was his healing modality. Getting outside of himself helped him heal a lot of his trauma. So we're airing this guy's story, and we had it out for a while, and I'm sitting there at work one day answering the phones, and this guy calls. He's up in Ohio somewhere, and he says, "Yeah, man, I'm a vet. I'm a Marine. I'm messed up. I'm drinking. I'm using drugs. My family's going down the toilet. I need help, brother." And I said, "Okay, I understand." And he said, "I've been listening to this podcast, this dude I served with, and man, I kept hearing about Warrior's Heart, so I quit mowing the grass. I picked up the phone. I started looking to see what you guys were about, so that's why I called." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I start sharing my story with him, and then he cuts me off and he goes, "Wait a minute. Did you say your name was Robert? Do you do this high-speed chicken feed podcast? Did you interview Keon Joel?" And I'm like, "Yeah, brother, that was me." And he goes, "Dude, that was the fucking podcast I was listening to, man." Like, wow. So
how awesome is that, right?
You wonder, is my story ever going to make a difference in somebody's life? Am I ever going to have any kind of reach? And that was proof right there. That dude, he was able to come into treatment. I sat down in the chow hall with him and had supper with him one night. And he was so very grateful for Warrior's Heart, for us, for telling the story, and for me helping him get there. It was just a beautiful experience,
Validation of purpose is what I call that.
Validation of purpose.
There. Yeah.
100%.
That's, right. Something similar. I have a lady that's very much, she's been supporting the show, Tabby Preston out of Brockville, Ontario in Canada. Her daughter's in it. So a big part of our focus, Robert, is on the family members of people who are suffering an addiction, right? Often, and you, in your story, I kind of zoned in on that one part where you said you had been listening to this podcast. Often that's not the case. Often people who are suffering are not tuning in. They're trying to survive. They're trying to whatever, right? But their families are on a constant hunt for resources. So a lot of our content gets directed that way, because I feel it's a great way that we can reach people. Tammy, her story is just epic. She's been a part of the show. She's been a supporter of us. She goes to get her hair cut last week, and her hairdresser is telling her about this grandma who's raising her kids. She was listening to this podcast, and it's all about this grandma who's raising her daughter's kids because her daughter's an addict, and how just inspiring it was. And Tammy's like, "That's me. You were listening to me tell my story." It's just right there. And they had this amazing moment together. Tammy had to make sure that I found out about it. Right. But
I like it.
Validation of purpose, right? Just absolutely validation of purpose. So, so what you got coming up? What you got coming up on High Speed Chicken Feed, Rob, for episodes? What do our people need to know? Right. Yeah.
Before I forget, can I jump on that real quick before I talk about the podcast?
Yeah.
So with the family, right? All I wanted to do was try to find a way to heal my kids, because my kids were suffering. My son had gotten expelled. Baby girl had, not baby girl, but my oldest daughter was struggling mental health. She'd been to numerous mental health facilities and struggled quite a bit. My youngest was having troubles as well. And how do I heal them? The only way that I have found was by healing myself, right?
Yeah,
all I wanted to do was try to help fix them, but I had to fix me first. When an amazing thing happened, and that they saw me fixing myself, and they began to follow suit in some ways, right? My son, he finished all of his welding certifications, and Votech just got a fantastic job, making more than I was making when I left the sheriff's office after 16 and a half years. He's doing fantastic.
That's awesome.
Baby girl is doing great in school and everything. My oldest daughter, the one who had struggled the most with mental health, she moved out as soon as she was 18, moved in with her boyfriend, which I did not like. And she struggled for a while. Around Thanksgiving, I'd wrestled with the idea of coming to work over here because I was leaving them 8 hours away back in Louisiana. Yeah. But around Thanksgiving, she came to me and was like, "Dad, I'm drowning. I don't want to be with this guy anymore. Can I come live with you?" "Absolutely, little girl. Come on." So she comes to live with me at Christmas, and then she ends up getting a job at Warrior's Heart. She works in intake, right? So I get them signed up. She checks them in. And the progress and the growth that I have seen in her specifically over the past few months has been tremendous. She came in at 18 at 78 pounds. Right? She's now almost 100 pounds. She's opened up. She's blossomed so much. She is doing so much better. So when we heal ourselves, we heal other people around us because they see that. AA is a program of attraction. People see what we have and they want that. Well, it's not just sobriety, it's healing. It's that post-traumatic growth. It's the getting our lives back together that people are attracted to, and they want to be in our life again. And my kids, my youngest told her mom a few months ago, I want to go live with dad, right? My son, the only reason why he's still there is because baby girl's still there, right? So to go from being booted out and my kids not really wanting to have that much to do with me to the point where one's living with me, the other two can't wait to get over here, man, that's huge. Now that ties directly into I appreciate that. That ties directly into the podcast, because this is the kind of stuff that we talk about with the podcast, right? I just got back from Warrior Path, which is a week-long intensive through the Boulder Crest Institute. And what we talk about is post-traumatic growth. And it's centered around the studies that have done around guys like Charlie Plum that were at the Hanoi Hilton for 6 years, right? What they experienced was worse than anybody could imagine for 6 years. But in every area of life since coming home, they are surpassing everybody that, guys that may have spent a month or two or a year or two in theater. These guys are doing better in every aspect of life, and they're studying those guys. So, I've taken some of those lessons and the other lessons that I've learned from Save a Warrior, from Warrior's Heart, and that's what we incorporate into the podcast. So what's coming up now, we've the episodes that we've recently recorded, Lonnie Masterson is in southeast central Texas. He was a Marine Corps medic, Greenside medic, had a hell of a lot of experiences. He is big in the vet court in his community and trying to get the vet court up and running. Veterans
I feel like
court.
I know that name. So has he had some big appearances on other shows or something?
He probably has.
Yeah, I think I've heard that name. I'm almost positive that I have. So continue though. Yeah.
So we got him coming up. We recently recorded Mikey Harden, Navy SEAL, who went from SEAL Team 3 to a out of control meth addict and lost everything, and is now doing very well up in Colorado with foundations that are helping guys get MERT treatment, magnetic resonance therapy treatment. Dick Hall was a Vietnam era fighter pilot, no, not fighter pilot, but forward operating pilot. He was one of the guys that was in the spy planes in Vietnam. Has a hell of a story. He worked his career all the way up to the Pentagon. And when everything came crashing down for him, he got sober and stayed sober solely in the rooms of AA. He is huge with Warriors Anonymous. He is a tremendous guy, lives over in Georgia. He's coming up. As I mentioned, Tom Spooner. Tom Spooner is one of the co-founders of Warrior's Heart, and we spoke with him for about 5 hours. That episode's going to be big as well. We're about to record Mark Nicholas. He was also a Navy medic that is a super smart guy. When it comes to psychedelics and alternative treatments for PTS and whatnot, he is very educated on that. So we're going to have him coming up pretty soon. But every one of these episodes that we do, the guys tell their stories of what got them to where they are and tell their stories of what is bringing them back from that and how they're able to help others, whether it be vet court, sponsoring other guys in AA, MERT treatment, psychedelic therapies, just a whole lot of other stuff. I mean, we have so many episodes that not just episodes ready to come out, but also just a long list, a plethora of people that we have to interview. Brad, we'll call him Brad W., cop up in Jersey, went to the, was it West Point or there? I think it was, he played football for West Point, and he ended up becoming a cop up in the New Jersey area. Fantastic dude. Thomas Clark was also Delta. We got him coming up pretty soon that we got to do an interview with. Yeah, I mean, we got some really good content ready to come. We're I don't want to say we're doing it just yet, but Tom Satterley and his wife Jen, we're working on trying to get them on the podcast. Tom was also Delta for a lot of years. He has a book called All Secure. I just finished it, fucking phenomenal. But he also has a foundation called the All Secure Foundation, and we hope to have him on pretty soon. We've talked with him before, so we're getting some good content out there, but bottom line, it's not just about the war stories. The way that we kind of do our little promo or our intro, it's not about the war stories. We're giving you the fuel that you need to survive in that fight of life. That high-speed chicken feed fuel, man. Right? By letting people know that, yeah, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay if you're in these fields. Look at it this way. I was a cop for 16 and a half years. I couldn't raise my hand and say, I need help. But if I was out there on the side of the road getting my ass handed to me by a suspect, I wouldn't have any problem jumping on the radio and calling a signal 70, officer needs assistance, right? Same thing with the military guys. You're in combat, you're in theater, calling for QRF, getting somebody in there to back you up, calling in for an airstrike. But when it comes to fighting our demons in our head, that is the toughest fucking battle. And we have such a hard time actually calling
Bravest
out
thing
for
I
help.
ever did was ask for help, right?
Exactly. And that's the thing. We talked about that stigma a while ago of looking weak. I can assure you, you will never become more of a badass until you fight those demons in your head and connect your head and heart again. That is the real battle. That is the real struggle. You've done it. So many people that you've interviewed have done it. That is the real fight. And you will find bravery that you never knew that you could possibly have.
Yeah. Asking for help is the refusing to give up. Right. That's what that is, right. So huge, man. Huge. Listen,
absolutely.
This is the longest episode I've had in months and I love it.
Sorry.
We're going to move. Don't be sorry, man. Like I said, the content runs out when, the time runs out when the content, you know what I said anyway. Hey, listen, that brings us to my favorite part of the show. That brings us to my favorite part of the show. And that's daily gratitude. So what you got for us?
So I recently got back into daily gratitudes as part of the, Warrior Path thing, but it's also something my sponsor would have me do in AA. So the one that went out this morning, I'm grateful for the awesome people in my life. I'm grateful for a sense of purpose, for God's will for my life and the power to carry that out. And I'm grateful for a great meal that I cooked last night, right? That sounds simple, but I can tell you one of the most empowering things that I have been able to do is take care of myself, and take care of myself is cooking a decent meal. I'm not talking like fast food or microwavable shit. What I cooked last night was in a crock pot, was chicken breast with fresh cut green beans, baby red potatoes with a sauce that went over it that had minced garlic, had paprika, had salt, pepper, lemon juice, olive oil, went over it. Oh my God, it was so good. I'm fixing to finish it off for lunch here in a minute. But that, being able to cook for myself and being able to take care of my kids with decent or good home cooked meals is important. Yeah. Self-care is important. And
damn straight it is. Yeah, it is.
So that was part of my gratitude right there.
Hey, that's awesome, man. For myself, I'm grateful for air conditioning. Because I live in a country now where you desperately need air conditioning all the time. I'm going to echo yours on the good food thing. I also live in a country where processed food is much more expensive than healthy food. Like it's you have to be wealthy to eat processed food here, which is crazy if you can imagine. Like that how's that for a polar opposite of the way things are in North America, right? Very grateful for that. I don't even own a microwave. I have an air fryer and I have a rice cooker. Right?
Nice.
It's like nothing I can't cook in both. It's just amazing, and it's also it's wonderful. I cook some really cool stuff in there. I'm also grateful to every single person who continues to like, watch, listen, share, comment on the posts, all the things you guys are doing to support. I appreciate it so much. And because every time you do any one of these things, you're getting me a little bit closer to living my best life. My best life is to make a humble living, spreading the message. The message is this. If you're in active addiction right now, today could be that day. Today could be the day that you start a lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call into detox, go to a meeting, pray, go to church. I don't care. Do whatever it is you have to do to get that journey started, because it is so much better than the alternative. If you have a loved one who's suffering an addiction right now, you're taking time to listen to this really great conversation. If you just take one more minute out of your day and text that person, let them know they are loved. Use the words.
You are loved.
That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings them back.